Good morning everybody. Hope we're doing alright today. It's morning where I am. Wherever you're watching this, I bid you a greeting, and whatever time of the day it is for you. Back with a brand new video, and lovely clear day today. I'm going to be going back into the realms of mystery and mythology once again. And today we're going to be talking about fairies, which is something that I know my sister has been dying for me to talk about. And we're going to be talking about the Collingly Fairies, which are the famous photographs from 1917, and discuss whether or not fairies are actual living beings that exist. So yeah, that sounds like something that you're interested in finding out more about. Please stick around. So then, fairies, they have a very long, rich history in the world of folklore and mythology. And one quote that I love is from, the Peter Pan book, the original book. And I probably won't get this spot on, but it pertains to the beginning of fairies. And I think it's when the first baby ever laughed for the very first time. Its laugh broke off into 1,000 little pieces and they all went skipping away, and that was the beginning of fairies. Yeah. Love that quote. Believe it or not, I didn't actually know this until I did a bit of research on the topic. But the legend, the origin of fairies, if you like, it's actually English. 12th century England, which, yeah, pretty cool. Us Brits can lay claim to at least one folklore legend. We invented fairies. They've been depicted in various different ways and different lights over, the centuries that passed. From woodland spruces and things that are more demonic in their nature. Obviously, Disney's interpretation of fairies was a lot more child friendly, a lot more family friendly, albeit them being quite jealous creatures. But what if they are actually a real, living, breathing being that exists as much as you or I do? It's interesting, is that? So, the Collingly Photos, Collingly Fairies, shall we say. There's a lot to this, a lot of players involved in it, so I'll try and condense it as best as I can and not rabbit on too much. But yeah, these photographs that were taken in 1917 by two girls from Collingly Beck, which is a place in England, and it depicts real life fairies. If you look at these pictures, you can see yourself. At the time, when camera trickery and camera, hoaxes weren't understood by the general public, it would have you fooled, it'd have anybody fooled. They're, just themselves on their own, they're lovely pictures. But there was a little bit more to it than that. So the girl in the photograph She was called Elsie, and her mother had come from South Africa. I really should have my sister with me for this, because she's my historical consultant, but I'm just going to have to fill in today. Yeah, they came from South Africa, and it was right at the end of the World War One, 1917. Obviously, World War One ended in 1918. And this girl's father, he was away in the war, fighting in France. And Elsie and her mother were staying with the girl's aunts, so her mother's sister, basically. Elsie and her cousin would often go out playing in the beck, the Collingly beck, and they would often come back with wet clothes and wet feet, much to their parents' annoyance. They'd say, why are you coming back soaked every time we send you out to play? I mean, that's just what kids do anyway. And they said that they went down to the beck to see the fairies, to play with the fairies. And, excuse me, fire smoke, man. They were going to prove it. So this girl took her father's camera. That's where his significance to the tale comes. And 30 minutes later, they came back home triumphant because they had caught pictures of fairies. And for a long time, the rest, as they say, is history. So these pictures, obviously, they were sensational. They spread throughout the country. And they eventually came to the attention of one Mr. Arthur Conan Doyle, who is a very famous author and is responsible for, quite possibly one of the greatest literary characters of all time, that of course being Sherlock Holmes. And Conan Doyle, bloody fire, sorry. Conan Doyle was a firm spiritualist, which, when I found that out the other day, when I was researching this video, that really just, it made me weak, because I consider myself a spiritualist as well. And Sherlock Holmes is one of my favourite book characters. I've read the books many times, and yeah, he wanted to believe in fairies himself. He was writing an article for the Strand magazine in 1920. It was a Christmas edition, and he published the pictures in the magazine. And again, that really launched these pictures further into the public eye, because Conan Doyle was a national treasure. He was world famous for his works. So it just added more legitimacy to these pictures. And the general public's reaction, it was mixed, I believe. Obviously I weren't there, just read about it. Some thought they were the genuine article and some thought they were hoaxes. But it wasn't until 1983 the truth finally came to light. So 1983, two girls confessed in a cryptozoological magazine called The Unexplained. They were being interviewed for a piece on the photographs. And yeah, they admitted that it was a hoax. And how they'd done it, Elsie had a children's book, and it had pictures of fairies in it, and she cut these pictures out and basically attached drawn on wings to these pictures, and they'd prop them up using sticks. And yeah, that was it. An ingenious hoax, once again, just like the surgeon's photo that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the Loch Ness Monster. Who would have thought to hoax fairies would be as easy as that? Just a couple of interesting side notes to this story. And the first one is that even though, the girls, Elsie and her cousin, confessed to this hoax, they still attested that they had seen real life fairies. It was just, of course, you couldn't catch them on camera. So, they made the pictures themselves. Another thing that really stands out for me as well, and it isn't to do with the fairies themselves, or the cousins or anything like that. It's the man who published the pictures, Mr. Arthur Conan Doyle. And of course, like I said before, Doyle is, you know, world famous. His legacy will go down in history for creating Sherlock Holmes. But he also wrote another book that isn't quite as famous as Sherlock Holmes. It's called The Lost World. And this is a story that is set in Victorian England. And a group of explorers go to South America to explore a great big plateau, which is it's like a mountainous point of geography that rather than it peaking, it's flat. And this plateau has dinosaurs living on it, but it also has something else living on there that obviously Conan Doyle included in the story, and that is ape men, which, you know, sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you know, you've not been on this channel long enough. I find it fascinating because, you know, Conan Doyle, as I said before, he was a spiritualist, and, you know, 1920 England was still, Darwinism wasn't still fully accepted as not just a theory but a fact of life, a fact of biology, that, you know, us as humans, we share a common ancestor with the other great apes, and that's how we evolved. You know, the society of the early 20th century still largely had the belief that we came from the Garden of Eden, that we came from Adam and Eve, you know, that the earth was only 6,000 years old. So why did Conan Doyle, you know, write ape men into his story? When it, as I say, you know, it wasn't accepted fully back then that that's where we came from. I don't know, but, you know, the fact that he believed in fairies, that he was a spiritualist, did he see the British Bigfoot? You know, makes me wonder. Seems like a bit of a too stark and strange of a coincidence for it not to be a possibility in my book. Now, I remember going back to 2018, there was a girl who I was dating, and her best friends were, you know, spiritualists, practicing witches, which of course at the time I didn't really know what that meant. And if this was just after I'd had my Bigfoot encounter, and I remember we were, you know, having a soiree, shall we say, with lots of alcohol. And they were talking about fairies. Now, of course, you know, my ears pricked up. I was a little uncomfortable anyway at the time, because, you know, I would consider myself quite an introverted person, whereas these were all very much extroverts. But anyway, point is, I was listening carefully, and they were talking about how fairies are definitely real, and that they claimed to have been in the presence of some. And they were talking about how they'd been to a place in their local woods, I guess, you know, the details on that weren't really crystal clear, and they'd been burning sage, they'd been performing, you know, I suppose seances, rituals, I don't know, whatever practicing witches do. They were meditating for hours and hours and hours. You know, they'd meditated in one spot by a pond. I remember that being quite a specific detail, and they had felt the presence of something, what they, in their heart of hearts, believed were fairies, but they were inclined not to look at them. They both shared this belief in their guts, in their hearts, that they shouldn't look at them, and, you know, I suppose just keep their backs to them. So I don't know, it's interesting, is that, I suppose. Do I personally believe in fairies? 100%. Obviously, I don't know what they are. Every legend and folklore myth has to have some grain of truth to it. We've spoken about that before on this channel, you know, in other videos we've done. Bigfoot, lake monsters, the paranormal, dogmen. You know, they have to come from somewhere. These are all great legends. They're important to us for some reason, you know, as external thinkers. And it's the same with fairies. You know, I think that they represent innocence in a nutshell, which of course is very, very important to us, because at some point in our life we all lose our innocence that we have as children. Some people retain it more than others in various degrees. So yeah, if we're talking about on like a spiritual, paranormal level, I won't even question it. They're real, you know, because once you go into that realm of cryptozoology, if you like, all bets are off for anything existing. As for them being an actual physical creature, being, I don't know, you know, there's the Hobbit people in Borneo, you know, skeletal remains of a species of the Homo genus, which obviously is our family, you know, us being Homo sapiens. And yeah, they were about 3 foot tall, you know, lived a couple million years ago. There's, you know, some people still believe that a small remnant population of them exists, which, you know, we'll talk about that in another video. But, you know, if there were 3 foot tall pygmy humans that existed once upon a time, you know, why couldn't there be people that were even smaller than that? You know, because the tree of life, evolution, if you like, is extremely diverse. You know, and 99% of all species that have existed on this planet, they're all extinct now. You know, millions and millions of life forms that we don't know about and never will know about. I don't know. Maybe it was and is a real physical creature. I don't know. So I think I'm going to wrap it up now there for today. Rabbited on about this now for long enough. It's interesting stuff though, you know, because as I've said before, I am more, my wheelhouse is more, you know, Bigfoot, wild men, as opposed to these more, you know, niche subjects. So it's interesting for me to educate myself about it and then make a video. So yeah, remember, anytime somebody says fairies do not exist, somewhere a fairy falls down dead, which is pretty sad really. Nobody wants to see that, do they? So yeah, thank you for watching this video. You made it through to the end. Leave a comment if you want on your personal beliefs about fairies, if you think they exist, if they don't exist. You know, I'm very open to it. Leave a like, share it on your social media, subscribe if you already haven't. I massively appreciate that. And yeah, I'll be back in a few days with another video just before Christmas Day. Keep an eye out for that, and I'll see you all further on down the road. Bye bye.